Dongwu pulled his cargo ship closer to the dead planet. The place looked terrible from space. Black smoke still rose from some areas, even though the aliens had left 3 months ago. His ship's computer beeped with warnings about danger, but he ignored them. He needed the money this salvage job would bring. The planet was called Keth 7. It used to be a mining colony run by the Vextar, a race of tall gray aliens who cared only about profit. They had dug deep into the planet looking for rare metals. Then something went wrong. Very wrong. Dongwu had heard the stories. The Vextar had brought dangerous creatures to guard their mines. These beasts were called shadow maws. They were supposed to be perfect weapons, smart enough to follow orders, but wild enough to kill anything that threatened the operation. But the creatures had escaped somehow. They killed many workers before the Vextar ran away in fear. Now the Galactic Authority had marked the planet as forbidden. Anyone caught here would face serious punishment. But Dongwu was desperate. His ship needed repairs he could not afford. His sister back on Earth needed medicine that cost more than he made in a year. This salvage job was his only hope. He landed near the main mining facility. The building was huge, made of dark metal that reflected no light. Many windows were broken, doors hung open like mouths screaming silent warnings. Dongwu checked his weapon and stepped outside. The air tasted like metal and death. His scanner showed no movement, but that did not make him feel safe. Shadow maws were supposed to be very good at hiding. He moved carefully through the empty halls, looking for valuable equipment he could sell. The facility was a mess. Tables were turned over. Walls had deep scratch marks. Some areas were covered in a dark substance that might have been blood. Dongwu tried not to think about what had happened here. He spent hours collecting small devices and metal parts. Nothing. Very valuable, but enough to pay for fuel to the next system. As he worked, he noticed something strange. The damage looked old, but some areas seemed recently disturbed. Fresh footprints in the dust. New scratch marks on the walls. Something was still alive here. Dongwu froze when he heard the sound. It was soft at first, like wind through broken glass. Then it became clearer, a low whining noise that seemed to come from below. His scanner showed the sound was coming from the lower levels, but also showed no life signs. Either his equipment was broken, or something down there was very good at hiding. He should have left. Every smart part of his brain told him to run, back to his ship and forget this place. But curiosity was stronger than fear. He followed the sound down dark stairs into the lower levels of the facility. The basement was worse than upstairs. The walls were cracked, and some areas had collapsed completely. Water dripped from broken pipes. The whining sound was louder. Here and now he could hear something else. Small, high-pitched noises that sounded almost like crying. Dongwu turned a corner and saw something that made him stop breathing. A massive creature lay trapped under fallen metal beams. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The beast was twice the size of the largest earth wolf, with fur so black it seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed like amber fire in the darkness. Long claws scraped against the floor as it tried to free itself. This had to be a shadow maw, but the creature was not alone. 3 small shapes huddled close to its body. Cubs. They were tiny compared to their mother, but already showed the same black fur and glowing eyes. They made soft crying sounds as they pressed against the trapped adult. Dongwu's scanner finally found them. The mother was badly hurt. Her breathing was shallow and fast. The cubs were weak from hunger and cold. They had been trapped here for days, maybe weeks. They were dying. The smart thing to do was leave. Galactic law was very clear. About shadow maws, they were classified as Class X bioweapons. Contact with them was forbidden. Helping them was treason. If anyone found out, Dongwu would spend the rest of his life in prison. But as he watched, the mother creature turned her great head toward him. Their eyes met across the dark room. He expected to see the mindless hunger of a weapon. Instead, he saw intelligence, fear, and something that looked almost like hope. The mother made a soft sound, not threatening but questioning. She was asking for help. One of the cubs tried to crawl closer to its mother but was too weak. It fell and could not get up. The mother whined and tried harder to free herself, but the metal beams were too heavy. She was helpless to save her children. Dongwu knew he should leave. He had his own problems, his own family to worry about. These creatures were supposed to be monsters. Everyone said so. The Galactic Authority, the news reports, even his own training manual said shadow maws were nothing but killing machines. But watching the mother try desperately to reach her fallen cub, Dongwu saw something else entirely. He saw a parent trying to protect her children. He saw a family that had been abandoned to die. His hands shook as he reached for his communicator. He could call for help. The authorities would come and put the creatures out of their misery. It would be quick and clean, the right thing to do according to galactic law. Instead, he turned off the communicator and put it away. Dongwu took a slow step forward. The mother tensed, ready to fight even in her weakened state. But when he held up his empty hands and spoke in a soft voice, she seemed to understand he meant no harm. "I see you," he whispered. "I see your babies. You're not weapons. You're just a family." The mother's eyes never left his face as he came closer. When he knelt beside the fallen cub and gently lifted it back to its mother, she made a sound that was unmistakably grateful. Dongwu looked at the trapped family and made his choice. He would help them, even if it meant breaking every law in the galaxy. Even if it meant becoming a criminal himself. Because sometimes doing the right thing meant ignoring what everyone else said was right. Dongwu ran back to his ship as fast as he could. His mind raced with what he had seen. The trapped family needed help immediately, but he had no idea how to help creatures that the entire galaxy feared. He grabbed his medical kit and some food, packages from his supplies. When he returned to the basement, the mother creature watched him carefully. She had managed to move slightly, but the heavy metal beams still pinned her down. The cubs were weaker now, barely moving against their mothers' side. Dongwu set down his supplies and pulled out a small translation device. Most spacefaring species could be understood through these machines, but he had never tried it on a shadow maw. The device hummed to life and began analyzing the sounds the mother made. To his surprise, the translator began showing patterns. The creature was not making random animal noises. She was speaking. Her sounds had structure, meaning intelligence behind them. The device struggled to translate, but slowly words began appearing on the screen. Danger, children, dying, please. Dongwu felt his heart break. This was not a mindless weapon. This was a mother begging for help to save her babies. He moved slowly toward the cubs. The mother tensed at first, but when she saw he was trying to help, she made encouraging sounds. The translator showed more words. Careful, weak, hungry. The 3 cubs were in bad shape. They were so small they fit in his hands. Their breathing was fast and shallow. Their little bodies felt hot with fever. Dongwu had basic medical training for space emergencies, but he had never treated alien animals before. He started with water. The cubs were clearly very thirsty. He helped them drink from a small bottle, supporting their tiny heads with his fingers. They drank eagerly, making soft sounds of relief. Next, he tried the food. The packages contained protein bars that most species could digest. He broke them into tiny pieces and offered them to the cubs. They ate hungrily, their strength slowly returning. The mother watched everything he did. Sometimes she made sounds that the translator showed as instructions. Smaller pieces, slower. That one needs more. She was teaching him how to care for her children. While the cubs ate, Dongwu examined the metal beams trapping their mother. The collapse had been bad, but not impossible to fix. He had tools on his ship that might work. But first, he needed to understand what had really happened here. He connected his portable computer to the facility's data system. Most of the files were corrupted or deleted, but some emergency records remained. What he found made him sick with anger. The Shadow Maws had not escaped. They had been prisoners. The files showed the truth. The Vextar had captured members of an intelligent species called the Keth Mori. They had taken them from their home worlds as children and brought them to secret facilities. There, they had tortured and changed them, using drugs and painful procedures to make them more aggressive and dangerous. The Keth Mori were not weapons. They were people. They had families, language, culture. The Vextar had stolen all of that and turned them into guards for their mining operations. The escape had been a desperate revolt. The Keth Mori had finally broken free of their control, devices, and fought back. Many had died in the fighting. The survivors had been left behind when the Vextar evacuated. Dongwu looked at the mother creature with new eyes. She was not a Shadow Maw. She was Keth Mori. She had a real name, a real identity that had been taken from her. In his mind, he began calling her Haewon, a Korean name meaning graceful garden. It seemed to fit her protective, nurturing nature. The cubs, too, deserved real names. The largest he called Tai-Ho. The middle one became Jiwoo. The smallest, a female, he named Yeon-Ah. They were not weapons. They were children who had been born into slavery and abuse. As he worked to free Haewon, his ship's communication system began beeping. Someone was trying to contact him. The display showed it was an official Galactic Authority frequency. Dongwu's blood turned cold. If the authorities found him here with the Keth Mori family, he would be arrested immediately. Possession of Class X. Bioweapons was one of the most serious crimes in galactic law. He could be executed, but he could not leave now. Haewon was still trapped, and the cubs were still too weak to survive on their own. He ignored the communication and kept working. It took 3 hours to move enough debris to free Haewon. She had several broken bones and many cuts, but she could move. When she finally stood up, she was even larger than he had thought. Her head reached his chest, and her powerful muscles showed under her dark fur. But instead of being frightening, she was gentle. The first thing she did was carefully check each of her cubs, licking their faces and making soft sounds of comfort. Then she turned to Dongwu and did something amazing. She bowed her head to him in a clear gesture of thanks. The translation device picked up her words. Gratitude, life debt, family saved. Dongwu felt tears in his eyes. This magnificent creature, who had every reason to hate all other species after what had been done to her, was thanking him for showing basic kindness. His ship's alarms suddenly screamed to life. The long-range sensors had detected multiple ships approaching the planet. Large ships with military signatures. The Galactic Authority was coming to sterilize the planet, which meant killing any shadow maws they found. Dongwu had minutes to decide. He could leave the family here and save himself. No one would ever know he had found them. He could continue his life, poor but free. Or he could take them with him and become a fugitive for the rest of his life. Hei-Wan seemed to understand the situation. She gathered her cubs close and looked at Dongwu with those intelligent amber eyes. She was not asking him to save them. She was too proud for that. But he could see the desperate hope she was trying to hide. Dongwu thought about his sister on Earth, waiting for expensive medicine. He thought about his ship that needed repairs. He thought about the simple life he had been trying to build. Then, he thought about 3 small cubs who had never done anything wrong except being born to the wrong species in the wrong place. "Come on," he said, picking up the smallest cub. "Let's get out of here." Hei-Wan understood immediately. She picked up the other 2 cubs in her mouth, gentle as a mother cat, and followed him toward the surface. Behind them, the sound of approaching ships grew louder. Dongwu was about to become the most wanted human in the galaxy. But as he felt the tiny heartbeat of the cub in his arms, he knew he was making the right choice. Getting Hei-Wan and her cubs onto his cargo ship was harder than Dongwu had expected. Hei-Wan was large and injured, and she was naturally afraid of the strange metal environment. The cubs were curious but weak. Every second they spent loading took them closer to disaster. Dongwu's ship was old and designed for carrying supplies, not passengers. He quickly cleared out a storage area and made it as comfortable as possible with blankets and cushions. Hei-Wan sniffed everything carefully before allowing her cubs inside. The first Galactic Authority ship appeared on his sensors just as he finished the pre-flight sequence. It was a destroyer-class vessel, heavily armed and fast. More ships were coming behind it. "Hold on," Dongwu told his passengers, though he doubted they understood. He fired up the engines and lifted off as quickly as his old ship could manage. The radio crackled to life immediately. "Cargo vessel, this is Commander So-Min of the Galactic Authority. You are in violation of quarantine protocols. Land immediately for inspection." Dongwu recognized the name. Commander So-Min was famous for her strict enforcement of bioweapon laws. She had never lost a fugitive and never shown mercy to violators. If she caught him, Hei-Wan and the cubs would be destroyed immediately. Instead of answering, Dongwu pushed his engines to maximum power and aimed for the asteroid field at the edge of the system. His ship shook and groaned with the effort, but it was still faster than the big military vessels. "Cargo vessel, respond immediately, or we will open fire." So-Min's voice was cold and threatening. Behind him, Dongwu heard Hei-Wan making soft sounds to calm her frightened cubs. The translation device showed her words. "Safe now, flying like birds, new den." She was trying to help her children understand what was happening without frightening them. Even in this terrifying situation, she remained a good mother. The destroyer opened fire, but Dongwu was already among the asteroids. He flew between the spinning rocks with desperate skill, using them as shields against the enemy weapons. His ship was small enough to fit through gaps that the larger vessels could not follow. But there were more ships coming. His long-range sensors showed at least 6 vessels surrounding the asteroid field. They were trying to trap him. That was when Haywan did something unexpected. She came to the cockpit and made urgent sounds while pointing at the sensor display. The translator struggled with her rapid speech, but the meaning became clear. Danger. Ships hiding. There and there. She could sense the enemy ships better than his instruments could detect them. Her enhanced senses were picking up things. His scanners missed. Dongwu quickly learned to trust her warnings. When she pointed left, he turned right. When she made worried sounds, he changed course immediately. Together, they began to outmaneuver ships that should have been impossible to escape. The chase continued for hours as they moved deeper into the asteroid field. Dongwu's hands were cramped from gripping the controls, and sweat made his clothes stick to his body. But slowly, they were getting away. Commander Somin's voice came over the radio again, angrier now. "Unknown vessel, you cannot escape. We have you surrounded. Surrender the bioweapons and we will consider reducing your sentence." Dongwu finally answered. "They're not bioweapons. They're a family." "Negative. Shadow Maws are Class X threats. They must be destroyed for galactic security." "Have you ever actually looked at one? Have you ever seen them with their children?" Dongwu asked. There was a long pause. Then Somin's voice returned, colder than before. "Sentiment will not change facts. You are harboring illegal weapons. Surrender now." In the back of the ship, the cubs were getting braver. They had stopped crying and were now exploring their new environment. Tae-ho, the largest, was particularly curious about the ship's systems. He watched the blinking lights with intelligent eyes and seemed to understand that they meant something important. Ji-woo was more interested in the sounds the ship made. The translator showed that she was asking her mother questions about the singing metal and humming stones. Even as young as they were trying to learn about this new world. Yeon-ah, the smallest, stayed close to her mother but watched Dongwu with careful attention. Sometimes she made soft sounds that the translator showed as safe human and helper friend. Seeing their curiosity and intelligence made Dongwu even more determined to save them. These were not mindless weapons. They were children learning about the universe, just like any other young beings. The turning point came when they reached the edge of a dangerous nebula. The cloud of gas and energy would interfere with sensors and communications, but it was also full of unpredictable radiation storms. No sane pilot would fly into it. Commander So-min's ships took positions around the nebula entrance, confident that their prey was trapped. "This is your last chance," So-min announced. "The nebula will destroy your ship. Surrender now and live." Dongwu looked at his passengers. Haywan met his eyes and made a sound the translator showed as, "Trust. Together. Fly into storm." She was telling him she trusted his judgment, even if it meant risking all their lives. Dongwu took a deep breath and flew into the nebula. The next few hours were the most terrifying of his life. The nebula twisted his ship in directions that did not exist in normal space. Radiation storms made his instruments go crazy. Strange lights flashed outside the windows like angry spirits. But Haywan's senses worked even here. She could feel the safe paths through the chaos in ways his instruments could not measure. When the nebula tried to pull them toward a deadly energy storm, she warned him in time to turn away. When dangerous radiation threatened to cook them, she guided him to pockets of safer space. They emerged from the nebula 3 systems away, battered but alive. Behind them, there was no sign of pursuit. The Galactic Authority ships could not follow where they had gone. For the first time since the chase began, Dongwu allowed himself to breathe normally. They had escaped. They were free. But freedom came with a price. His ship's identification codes were now in every law enforcement database in the galaxy. His face would soon be on wanted posters from here to the galactic core. He could never go home again. HFY seemed to understand what he had sacrificed for them. She came to the cockpit and gently placed one of her large paws on his shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably meant to comfort him. The translator picked up her words. Sorrow, loss, gratitude, eternal, pack bond formed. She was telling him that she understood his sacrifice and that he was now part of her family. In Kethamori culture, pack bonds were sacred. She would protect him just as fiercely as he had protected her cubs. As they flew toward the outer rim territories where law enforcement was lighter, Dongwu felt something he had not expected. Despite losing everything he had worked for, despite becoming a fugitive, he felt happy. He had saved a family. He had done the right thing. And now he had a new family of his own, one that would never abandon him no matter what came next. The cubs were already treating him like part of their pack, making friendly sounds when he walked by and bringing him small objects they thought he might like. They were not the mindless killers that galactic propaganda claimed. They were loving, intelligent beings who deserved the same rights as any other species. Dongwu promised himself that someday the galaxy would see the truth about the Kethamori. Someday they would be free to live without fear. But first, they all needed to survive long enough to make that day possible. 6 months had passed since the escape from Keth 7. Dongwu's life had become something he never could have imagined. He now lived on New Haven, a rough frontier station where few people asked questions about anyone's past. The station existed in the space between different galactic territories, making it perfect for people who needed to stay hidden. His small apartment was barely big enough for all of them, but they had made it work. HFY had healed from her injuries and was now strong and healthy. The cubs had grown amazingly fast and were no longer the tiny, weak creatures he had first found. Tae-ho was now as large as a full-grown Earth dog and showed incredible intelligence about how machines worked. Jiwoo had developed an amazing ability to understand different languages and sounds. Yona, still the smallest, had begun showing something that seemed almost like magic. She could sense what other people were feeling and thinking. Living with the Kethamori family had taught Dongwu many things. They were not just intelligent. They were brilliant. They learned new concepts faster than most adult humans. They understood complex emotions and social relationships. They had their own culture with games, stories, and traditions that HFY taught her children every day. The translator device had improved as it learned their language. Now conversations flowed easily between them. Dongwu had learned that HFY's real name was actually something beautiful that meant morning light on still water. But she had chosen to keep the name he gave her because it represented her new life of freedom. Their peaceful life was protected by an underground network of people who helped refugees and fugitives. The network was led by a mysterious person known only as Hyun Soo, who Dongwu had never met in person, but who had provided them with false identification papers, safe housing, and work opportunities. Dongwu now worked as a mechanic at the station's main repair dock. His skills with older ships made him valuable, and his bosses did not care about his past as long as he did good work. The pay was not much, but it was enough to buy food and medicine for his unusual family. The cubs loved exploring the station, though they had to be very careful not to let anyone see what they really were. To most observers, They looked like large, unusual pets that Dongwu had brought from some distant world. Only a few trusted friends knew the truth. One of those friends was Dr. Bo Young, a disgraced xenobiologist who had been exiled from the galactic scientific community for opposing Shadow Maw experimentation. She had recognized what the cubs really were within minutes of meeting them. Dr. Bo Young had spent years studying the few Kethmori specimens that scientists had been allowed to examine. She knew more about their species than almost anyone in the galaxy. When she met Haiwan and her children, she was amazed to see them healthy and free. "I always knew they were more than weapons," she told Dongwu during one of her visits. "But I never imagined they were this intelligent. This family could change everything if the galaxy knew the truth about them." Dr. Bo Young began conducting careful studies of the family's abilities. She documented their language, their problem-solving skills, their emotional intelligence. The results were incredible. The Kethmori were not just sentient. They were as advanced as any species in the galaxy. But the most shocking discovery came when she analyzed their genetics. The torture and modification the Vextar had done to them was even worse than anyone had realized. The aggressive behavior that made them useful as weapons was completely artificial. Their natural personalities were gentle, protective, and cooperative. They were peacekeepers, Dr. Bo Young explained to Dongwu as they watched the cubs play together. Before the Vextar found them, the Kethmori were known throughout their region of space as mediators and protectors. They helped other species solve conflicts and protected the weak from those who would hurt them. This explained so much about Haiwan's behavior. Even after all the trauma she had experienced, her first instinct was still to protect and nurture. She had adopted Dongwu into her pack, not just out of gratitude, but because protecting others was simply who she was. The cubs were developing their own personalities based on their true nature, rather than artificial conditioning. Tae-ho was becoming a natural explorer, always wanting to see new places and understand how things worked. Ji-woo was developing into a communicator, someone who could understand and connect with different types of beings. Yeon-ah was growing into her role as an empath, able to sense when others were hurting and needing comfort. Life seemed good until the day everything went wrong. Dongwu was working late at the repair dock when his communicator buzzed with an emergency message from Hyun-soo. The text was brief but terrifying. "Compromised. They found us. Run now." He raced home to find their apartment already under surveillance. Through the window, he could see Galactic Authority agents moving through the hallways. Commander So-min had finally tracked them down. Using maintenance tunnels he had learned about during his months on the station, Dongwu made his way to a back entrance of their building. He managed to reach their apartment just as Haiwan was gathering her cubs for evacuation. She had sensed the danger before the warning message arrived. "Where can we go?" Dongwu asked as they prepared to flee. Haiwan made sounds that the translator showed as safe place, pack friend, mountain cave. She was talking about Dr. Bo Young's hidden laboratory in the asteroid mining tunnels outside the station. It was dangerous to get there, but it might be their only chance. The escape through the station was a nightmare. Authority agents were everywhere, searching every ship and questioning every resident. But the Kethmori family's enhanced senses gave them a huge advantage. They could smell the agents from far away and hear their communications through the walls. Yona proved especially valuable. Her empathic abilities let her sense which people were safe to approach and which ones were working with the authorities. Several times, she steered them away from traps that would have caught them. They reached Dr. Bo Young's hidden lab just as the search teams were closing in. The laboratory was built into old mining tunnels and was almost impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. Dr. Bo Young was waiting for them with terrible news. "Hyunsu was captured," she said. "They have most of the network. But the worst part is what they found." She showed them a data pad with intercepted communications. The Galactic Authority had discovered evidence of other Keth Mori survivors hidden throughout the galaxy. There were at least 50 families being protected by various underground groups. Commander So-min was planning to hunt them all down. "We can't run forever," Dr. Bo Young said. "If we want to save the others, we need to change the galaxy's understanding of what the Keth Mori really are." Dongwu looked at his adopted family. The cubs were tired and frightened, but they stayed close to their mother and tried to be brave. Hae-won met his eyes with a look of determination that surprised him. The translator picked up her words. "No more hiding. Truth must be known. Cubs deserve freedom." She was right. They could not spend their lives running from one hiding place to another. The other Keth Mori families deserved better than that. The cubs deserved to grow up in a world where they would not have to hide what they were. It was time to fight back. But first, they would need help from someone powerful enough to make the galaxy listen to the truth. The problem was finding someone like that who would believe their story and risk everything to help them. As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Bo Young smiled grimly. "I think I know someone who might help us, but getting to him will be the most dangerous thing we've ever attempted." Outside the hidden laboratory, the sound of search ships grew louder. Time was running out, and their next choice would determine the fate of every Keth Mori family in the galaxy. Dr. Bo Young's plan was incredibly dangerous, but it was their only hope. She wanted to take Hae-won and her family directly to the Galactic Council on the capital world. There, she hoped to convince Elder Wu Jin, the most respected member of the council, to give them a fair hearing. Elder Wu Jin was famous throughout the galaxy for his wisdom and fairness. He had served on the council for over 60 years and had never been accused of corruption or bias. If anyone would listen to the truth about the Keth Mori, it would be him. But getting to the capital world meant traveling through the most heavily guarded space in the galaxy. Commander So-min and her forces would be watching every route, every station, every ship that might be carrying their fugitives. They spent 3 days planning their approach. Dr. Bo Young had contacts among the scientific community who might help them get close to Elder Wu Jin. Dongwu used his knowledge of ship systems to modify their vessel so it could slip past security scanners. The Keth Mori family prepared for what might be their last journey together. The cubs had grown so much during their months of freedom. Taeho was now almost as large as his mother and had developed an amazing understanding of stellar navigation. He could look at star charts and immediately understand the best routes between systems. Ji-woo had learned to communicate in 12 different languages and could mimic any accent perfectly. Yona's empathic abilities had become so strong, she could sense the emotional state of people on other ships. Hae-won had spent days teaching her children about their true history. She told them stories of the great Keth Mori civilization that had existed before the Vextar destroyed it. She taught them the ancient songs that their people had sung and the traditions that made them who they were. "If we do not survive," she told them through the translator, "you must remember these things. You must carry our people's memory forward." The journey to the capital world took 2 weeks of careful travel through back routes and forgotten systems. 3 times they had to hide from patrol ships. Once they barely escaped a random inspection that would have exposed them immediately, but they made it. The great city world of the galactic capital spread before them like a jewel in space. Millions of ships moved in carefully controlled patterns around the planet. The government buildings could be seen from orbit, massive structures that housed the representatives of thousands of species. Dr. Bo Young's scientific contacts helped them land without triggering security alerts. They were met at the spaceport by Professor In-ho, an old friend of Dr. Bo Young who had agreed to help despite the enormous risk to his career. "Are you certain about this?" Professor In-ho asked as he saw the Kethmori family for the first time. "If you're wrong about them, we'll all be executed for treason." HFY approached the nervous professor and made a gentle sound that the translator showed as, "Greetings, honored teacher. We come in peace, seeking justice for our people." Professor In-ho's eyes widened in shock. He had expected to see dangerous beasts. Instead, he met a dignified mother speaking with perfect politeness and intelligence. Getting an audience with Elder Wu Jin required calling in many favors and making many promises. But Dr. Bo Young's reputation as a brilliant scientist, even a disgraced one, carried enough weight to open doors. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. That night, as they waited in Professor In-ho's laboratory, Dongwu felt the weight of what they were attempting. If this failed, every Kethmori family in the galaxy would be hunted down and destroyed. The responsibility was almost too much to bear. HFY seemed to sense his worry. She came to sit beside him and placed her large paw gently on his shoulder. The translator picked up her words. "Fear is natural, Pack Brother, but courage is choosing to act despite fear. You have shown more courage than anyone should have to bear." Her words gave him strength. Whatever happened tomorrow, they would face it together. The council chambers were more impressive than Dongwu had imagined. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in a vast circular room that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. At the center sat Elder Wu Jin, a tall, thin being with silver skin and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. When Commander So-min saw them enter, her face filled with rage. "Elder Wu Jin, these criminals are harboring Class X bioweapons. In direct violation of galactic law, they should be arrested immediately." But Elder Wu Jin raised one hand for silence. "I have agreed to hear their testimony. Speak, Dr. Bo Young. Present your evidence." Dr. Bo Young stepped forward and began her presentation. She showed genetic analyses proving that the Kethmori's aggressive behavior was artificially created. She presented historical records of their peaceful civilization. She demonstrated their intelligence through complex problem-solving tests. The council listened with growing amazement as the evidence mounted. These were not mindless weapons. They were people who had been enslaved and tortured into becoming something they were never meant to be. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Elder Wu Jin looked directly at HFY and spoke. "Kethmori Mother, if you are truly sentient as these people claim, then speak for yourself. Tell this council what you want from us." HFY stood proudly in the center of the great chamber. Her cubs flanked her on either side, and Dongwu stood behind them. When she spoke, her words were translated for the entire galaxy to hear. "Honored elders of the galactic community," she began, "I am HFY of the Kethmori people. I speak for my children, for my mate who died in Vextar captivity, and for all my people who suffer in slavery throughout the galaxy." The chamber was completely silent as she continued. "We do not ask for revenge against those who wronged us. We do not demand punishment for the Vextar who destroyed our worlds and enslaved our children. We ask only for recognition that we are people, not weapons. We ask for the right to live freely, to raise our young, and to contribute our abilities to the galactic community that has forgotten we exist." She paused and looked directly at Commander So-Min. "This human, Dongwu, risked everything to save my family when the entire galaxy had abandoned us to die. He showed us that there is still honor and compassion among the stars. If one being can choose mercy over law, surely a great civilization can choose justice over fear." The impact of her words was immediate and powerful. Representatives throughout the chamber began talking excitedly among themselves. Many seemed moved by her dignity and eloquence. Commander So-Min tried to object. "Elder Wu Jin, this creature has been trained to say these things. It's an elaborate deception designed to—" "Silence!" Elder Wu Jin commanded. His voice carried such authority that the entire chamber fell quiet instantly. "I have lived for 140 years, the elder said. "I have seen many species, heard many arguments, witnessed many deceptions, but I have never heard anything as genuine as the words we have just heard." He stood up from his seat, and the entire council rose with him. "By the power invested in this council by the Galactic Charter, I hereby declare that the beings known as Shadow Maws are in fact the Kethmori people, a sentient species with full rights under galactic law. All previous classifications of them as bioweapons are immediately revoked." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Commander So-Min's face was pale with shock and anger, but she could not argue with a formal council declaration. Elder Wu Jin continued, "Furthermore, all Kethmori currently held in captivity must be freed immediately. The Vextar Corporation is hereby charged with genocide and slavery, and the human Dongwu, who showed courage and compassion when the galaxy showed only fear, is to be honored as the first human ambassador to the Kethmori people." As the celebration continued around them, Dongwu felt Haiwan's paw on his shoulder again. But this time the translator showed different words. Victory, freedom, new beginning for all our people. The cubs pressed close to their mother, finally able to stand proudly in public without fear. They would grow up in a galaxy where they could be themselves without hiding. Years later, when Dongwu was an old man, he would often sit in his garden and watch Tae-Ho teaching mixed classes of human and Kethmori children about courage and friendship. Hei-Wan, now gray around the muzzle but still dignified, would tell the young ones stories about the time when their people were slaves and how one human's kindness had changed everything. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still those who feared the Kethmori or resented their freedom. But slowly, year by year, the truth spread. The former weapons became teachers, explorers, and protectors once again. They used their enhanced abilities to help other species solve problems and explore dangerous worlds. And sometimes, late at night, Dongwu would remember that moment in the dark basement when he had first chosen compassion over law. It had seemed like such a small choice at the time, but small choices, made with courage and love, could change the entire galaxy. The Kethmori were free, and the universe was better for it.